You're watching KX News, putting North Dakota first.
Welcome back.
Our guest today has an extensive law career, beginning as a law clerk and now serving as our state Supreme Court's Chief Justice. Chief Justice Jon Jensen, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So first of all, why did you choose law as a profession?
Probably, I would have to say the influence of one of my older brothers. I'm the youngest of six, and kind of the impressionable high school age, one of my older brothers was in law school. I used to, you know how it is, sometimes older brothers, I was the smartest, I was the most athletic, and I followed him out to the law school a few times, and I think that was probably the biggest influence.
And when did you decide that you wanted to be a state Supreme Court justice?
Oh boy, that would have been 2017, shortly after the opening appeared. But yeah, it wasn't something that I was thinking about. We talk about judgeships all the time in North Dakota as there are so few of them. You know, we have 52 trial court judges and 5 Supreme Court justices. The timing's not always perfect, so if you have any interest at all and there's an opening, you kind of have to apply at that time because they just don't open up very often.
Mm-hmm. And when you were elected as Chief Justice, what was your reaction?
I'm very happy. I don't know if you know, my background is accounting. So I have an accounting degree and then a CPA, and one of the things I like is the administrative aspect of the job, the budgeting, the allocation of resources. That's something that we all do collectively as 5, but the Chief Justice has some influence over.
Now, nationally, the Supreme Court is getting quite a bit of attention. What are your thoughts on everything that has been going on recently?
You know, it's such a very different dynamic, and the reason why I say that is, in North Dakota, you know, the U.S. Supreme Court hears maybe 60 appeals a year, and they get to pick and choose what they hear. Ours is a completely different dynamic in North Dakota. We hear about 400 a year, and we have no choice. If the legislature has said that it's a case that can be appealed, we have to hear it, and our Constitution requires us to issue a written opinion. So, you know, we typically aren't dominated by 1 or 2 large cases. So it's just a completely different dynamic being on this court than I think it would be on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. What is your opinion about what we've been seeing on the national level?
Yeah, I think there's too much merging of the different branches. And, you know, we have an executive branch at both the federal and state level. We have a legislative branch at both the federal and state level. And, of course, we have a judicial branch at both. My concern is primarily people losing sight of that they all have different roles. And the idea, I think some people would like our judicial branch to act like an executive branch, and others would like it to act like a legislative branch, and that's one of the concerns, or one of the things I view at the federal level that it's a concern for me. There's some basic lack of civics on what the court's role is that I think causes confusion and also causes some stress and some concern about how the court operates. Mm-hmm.
And how often in your experience do you find yourself changing how you thought you would initially decide a case, whether it be due to researching case law or judicial precedent?
Yeah, you mentioned case law and you mentioned judicial precedent. It's actually my colleagues. I have 4 wonderful colleagues to work with. We all have just a little bit different background on how we came to the court and when we came to the court in our career, and it's amazing how, without argument, they can be persuasive and they can subtly point you down a direction that gets you to the right result. So a lot of times if I change my mind, it's because of my colleagues primarily.
Mm-hmm. And going back for just a moment about what we talked about, your concern, how does all of that, what we're seeing nationally, does it apply to us here in North Dakota?
You know, I think less. You know, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, the volume of cases that we do, we certainly have some cases that have a broad impact, but our impact is limited to North Dakota, and our impact, you know, most of our cases, well over 80% are unanimous, and well over 80% are affirming trial courts. So there's generally not that contention. You know, occasionally we have a case that has pretty broad impact across the state. Those are generally commercial matters, oil and gas matters, those types of things. But again, it's because of the volume and because of the way the court is set up in North Dakota, we just don't have kind of those high-profile things that stay in the media for months and months and months.
Well, Chief Justice, thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.